The evening sun poured through the tall windows of the office building, casting long shadows on the marble floor. Mia cramped her notebook against her chest, her heart pounding with each step down the dimly lit corridor. She was just a junior analyst, trying to keep up with the demands of her boss, Mr. Langston. Mia had been with the company for 2 years, and in those years she learned something crucial. Mr. Langston was not a man to take lightly. He was sharp, always seemed to know more than everyone else, and often had an air of mystery about him. Employees whispered about him during coffee breaks, sharing tales of his long hours and his relentless drive for perfection. But beneath that confident facade, Mia had an unsettling feeling that his attention could turn icy at any moment. So when he asked her to meet him in his office that evening, the knot in her stomach tightened. As she reached his door, Mia took a deep breath and knocked softly. "Come in," he called, his voice deep and commanding. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office smelled of expensive leather and old books. Mr. Langston sat behind his polished desk, frowning at a pile of papers. His graying hair was slicked back, but the strands around his temples betrayed a little anxiety. "Hey, Mia," he said, glancing up. "Of course, Mr. Langston," Mia replied, but something in his tone made her uneasy. "I need you to review this report before it goes to the board," he said, sliding a stack of papers toward her. "Sure," she said, but the report wasn't why her heart raced. A question had been nagging at her since the office closed, and now with him sitting there, she felt compelled to ask. "Mr. Langston, if you don't mind me asking." The moment the words left her mouth, she realized how foolish it sounded. He looked at her, and for a split second, his expression shifted. Surprise mixed with annoyance, but then he resumed his calm demeanor and said, "I'm busy, Mia." Without another word, he turned back to his papers, dismissing her question like it was nothing. Mia felt heat rise to her cheeks. She shrugged it off, diving into the report, trying to ignore the growing feeling that something was off. More hours passed, and the sun sank lower in the sky, pouring warm golden light through the blinds. Around 7, she shifted in her chair, glancing at the clock. But instead of the comforting sound of people winding down for the day, the office echoed with an unsettling silence. Other employees had left hours ago, and she found herself alone with Mr. Langston. She sensed he had become quieter too, focusing intently on whatever was on his desk. Mister," she ventured again, hesitating. "No, just finish that report," he replied, his voice a flat tone that sent chills down her spine. "Okay," she murmured and turned back to her work, but the words of her colleagues echoed in her mind. They often talked about Mr. Langston's unpredictable nature, how he could snap at the faintest perceived mistake. Anxiety crept in like a thief, prying at her determination to just get through the night. Eventually, the ticking clock broke the silence. The only sound now was the shuffling of papers. Mia felt heavy with uncertainty. That's when she noticed something unusual, the large dark suitcase in the corner of the office. She had never seen it before. It seemed out of place among the elegant decor. Growing curious, she leaned a little closer to it, her eyebrows knitting together. Had he just arrived? Why was he still there with the suitcase? "Are you sure everything is okay, mister?" she ventured again, unable to hold back. "You seem..." He didn't look up. "I'm fine, Mia." But something about the suitcase unsettled her. Why was it there? Her instincts kicked in. Would he really leave with just that suitcase? She couldn't shake the feeling that it meant something deeper than mere travel. It was heavy with an unspoken weight. Suddenly, the door creaked open behind her. Mia turned to see Mary, the office manager, entering, her shoes clicking against the polished floor. "Mr. Mary asked, her voice bright, like she was used to coaxing smiles from him. He looked up, finally acknowledging her presence. "I'll need them later. Thanks, Mary," he said coolly, his earlier irritation resurfacing. Mary nodded slowly, her eyes darting between them, sensing the tension. But then, before Mia could join the conversation, Mr. Langston waved his hand as if to dismiss her. Mary walked out, closing the door behind her. The world outside faded away again, leaving Mia alone with Mr. Langston. When he finally rose from his desk, her throat went dry. He seemed to have forgotten she was there. He moved towards that suitcase she had noticed earlier. "Mr. Langston," she blurted out, her heart racing. He paused but didn't turn around. "I have things to take care of," he said cryptically. But Mia felt it, fear pulsed through her. The suitcase, it was wrong. She asked, her voice trembling. Her instincts screamed at her that something was far too off. "Yes, I need to go," he said, his tone now harsher, lifting the suitcase and carrying it toward the door. "Did something happen?" She stepped forward, desperation spilling from her voice, but he kept walking with resolute steps. "No," he said sharply. That was when the final thread of doubt snapped. Mia felt that something terrible was happening, hidden right beneath the surface. Without thinking, she rushed forward, feeling reckless. "Mr. Langston, please." The door opened suddenly, and in that split second of distraction, she saw him flick a glance back at her. A flash of frustration crossed his face, but for Mia, it revealed a crack in his armor. She caught a glimpse of uncertainty there, something rare. With that, he turned back to the door, and before she could say another word, he pushed past her. She felt she couldn't simply let him go. She was caught at a crossroads of fear and determination. Chasing him, she called on instinct, "You can trust me." But as louder voices echoed in the hallway, Mr. Langston stopped for just a moment, looking back. In that brief glance, she glimpsed the weariness in his eyes. It was as if a storm raged just beneath his calm facade, and for a moment she felt a connection, as if they were standing as allies in a fight against something unknown. "Mia," he began, but then he sighed, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy between them. "I can't explain now." Without another word, he turned sharply and walked out, suitcase in hand. The hallway swallowed him up, leaving her alone with the haunting thought that perhaps she had missed more than just an opportunity. She stood still, barely breathing, the air thick with tension. In that moment, it dawned on her he may be going somewhere dangerous, carrying secrets she could only imagine. Panic surged through her as the distorted echo of his voice rang in her head. Why had she ignored his shutting her out? Why hadn't she pushed harder? Mia turned around and glanced back into the office, where the chaotic papers now sat in a quiet pile. There was a sense of finality lingering in the air, an unsettling understanding that her life at the company wouldn't be the same anymore. Stepping out of the office, she resolved to find answers. Whatever had slipped past her in those final moments, she wouldn't let it fade into the shadows. She was going to uncover the truth behind that suitcase, and she couldn't ignore the pulling stitch of panic woven through her heart. With a determined spirit, she took a deep breath. She had to figure it all out. Somehow, she felt like it was only the beginning. As the door swung shut behind her, the evening light faded, but within her, a fire sparked. She would get to the bottom of it, she had to. As the clock struck 6, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and the office door banged open with an unsettling crack. Mia looked up from her computer, a chill running through her. Mr. Langston, her boss, stood in the doorway, his silhouette highlighted by the fading daylight. He looked different. There was a nervous energy about him, an edge that sent a ripple of unease through the small space of their shared office. "Mia," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Of course, Mr. Langston," she replied, glancing at the time. She had planned to leave early, but there was something in his tone that pulled her in. She followed him into his office, the air thick with anticipation. The walls were lined with awards and accolades, a testament to his impressive career. But in this moment, they felt like prison bars. Mia watched as he paced back and forth, his hands gesturing animatedly, like he was trying to work through something intangible. "Mia, I need you to focus," he said, halting suddenly. "Of course, I'm ready for whatever comes next," she said, confidence flooding her voice even as a knot formed in her stomach. He stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "Sure," Mia replied, her brow furrowing slightly. She noticed that the suitcase she hadn't seen before leaned against the wall, dark leather worn at the edges. Something about it looked out of place. His question seemed casual, but Mia sensed an undertone of desperation beneath his words. Before she could respond, shadows crossed his face, and she saw the tension tightening his jaw. "It's important," he pressed, almost like he was daring her to investigate further. But then, something in her mind interrupted. Wasn't it unprofessional to discuss personal plans? It felt trivial amid the tense atmosphere, so she swallowed her instinct and brushed it aside. "No big plans," she said simply, unable to shake the feeling that she had just made a mistake. His expression darkened for a split second, but he quickly masked it with his usual hard exterior. "Good." He motioned toward the suitcase again, and Mia's heart raced. She asked, curiosity bubbling, "Just a business trip?" There was steel in his voice now, as if he had switched gears, boxing away whatever concern he had just revealed. "Right," she said cautiously. "Mia," he snapped, irritation flashing in his eyes. "You're missing the point. I need your full attention." And just like that, the moment slipped away. She could feel the weight of the room shift as they both fell silent. What felt like an important conversation had morphed back into mere work, but it hung in the air, unresolved, like an unanswered question marked in bold. Hours passed, and Mia pushed through piles of paperwork, her mind drifting back to that conversation. Surely there was something she should have noticed, a sign that she had let slip by. Was Mr. Langston under pressure? Did it relate to the suitcase? Finally, as the clock neared 8, she stood to stretch, feeling her muscles tense from hours of sitting. Mr. Langston hadn't made a move to leave. Instead, he was still buried in papers, the suitcase now resting silently in the corner. Another knock echoed out of nowhere, and in stepped Mary, the office manager. Her eyes darted between the two of them. "Mr. Langston, I hope I'm not interrupting." His cheeks tightened, and Mia sensed the familiar tension building again. "This isn't the time, Mary," he said curtly. Mary hesitated, taken aback. "I was just go back to the accounting department," he interrupted, his tone brimming with authority. Mary left the office, a look of confusion etched on her face. Mia felt a pang of regret for her, sensing the pressure Mr. Langston was under. She thought but kept her mouth shut. Days like this were common. Pressure, anxiety, and frantic deadlines all rolled into one. Yet today felt particularly loaded, like they were all standing at the edge of something dark and shadowed just out of view. Finally, Mr. Langston leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. "You know, Mia," he said almost absently, "I've been at this for a long time." That moment, that second of vulnerability, shattered barriers. "I think it is," she replied softly. "You've done so much, and everyone respects you here." He nodded slowly, but she could tell he was miles away, lost in thoughts that seemed impossible to untangle. Then he glanced up at her, a flicker of something familiar crossing his face, the pressure, the expectation, the unrelenting need to succeed. Mia, he said, his voice drifting back into focus. But then he cut himself off, his lips pressing together as if sealing away whatever feelings bubbled beneath. The moment passed and he stood abruptly, grabbing the suitcase. I have to go, he declared, an edge creeping back into his voice. Startled, Mia shot up from her seat. Wait, where are you heading? No time, you'll figure it out, he said dismissively. But as he strode toward the door, the suitcase firmly in hand, the weight of his earlier words lingered heavy in the air. Mia, do me a favor, he called back just before stepping out. Trust your instincts. With that, he disappeared down the hall, leaving her standing there, the words echoing in her mind. Trust your instincts. Be vigilant. The silence that ensued felt deafening, and Mia felt a creeping dread wash over her. Something was terribly wrong, and she could feel it like an electric charge in the air. For the next couple of hours, she tried to piece everything together, her thoughts swirling like a storm. The way he spoke, the urgency in his voice, and the mysterious suitcase, it all simmered in the back of her mind. What had he been about to confide in her? Why had he avoided her question? The questions piled up, twisting around each other like a web pulling tighter. Finally, she could take no more. With her heart racing, she pushed herself out of her chair and headed down the corridor. The building felt desolate now, shadows stretching along the walls as she moved forward, uncertainty trailing her like a shadow. As she reached the exit, the weight of her decision bore down on her. Should she confront him, or was it better to leave it be? But she knew she couldn't walk away from this, not without trying to uncover the truth, not when a piece of her felt tied to Mr. Langston's fate. She stepped outside into the sprawling concrete jungle, the sun dipping low on the horizon. The streets buzzed with life, but all she could think about was the weight of that suitcase and the secrets it might hold. Right as she was about to head home, she caught sight of him across the street. Mr. Langston was having a conversation with a man in a dark suit, their faces tense and close, all shrouded in the flickering streetlights. Curiosity pulled her closer, but caution held her back. What if he noticed her? What if he didn't want her to see this? But the idea of walking away, of letting this moment slip away, felt worse. Mia crept behind a nearby car, her heart pounding as she strained to overhear their conversation. She caught snippets of intense dialogue, words like deal and deadline floating through the air. But what really made her blood run cold was the anger flaring in Mr. Langston's face. He shouted, gesturing wildly as the other man narrowed his eyes. The man replied sharply, voice low and threatening. This isn't just about you, Langston. Mia's mind raced, blood drained from her face as vivid images of betrayal and deceit danced in front of her eyes. They weren't just talking about business, this was personal. Suddenly she caught a glimpse of the suitcase. The man grabbed it, flinging it toward Mr. Langston. You want this back, then you know what you have to do, he sneered. Mia's heart raced. What on earth was happening? She had stumbled into a darker world than she ever imagined. Mr. Langston swallowed hard, looking torn, an internal conflict raging within him. The door back into the office seemed to call to her, but she felt paralyzed. What if she revealed the truth? What would it do to their fragile dynamic? Yet could she live with herself if she didn't intervene? Suddenly, Mr. Langston turned, his eyes scanning the crowd, and for a fleeting second they locked onto hers. Fear gripped her and she ducked behind the car, heart racing as she debated, weighing her options. Don't say a word, he mouthed silently, his expression a storm of anxiety and urgency. But she couldn't just walk away. A decision formed within, contrasting against the internal chaos. She couldn't sit back and pretend this was just another day at the office. She had to step up. Mia bolted back into the shadows, sneaking back into the office building, mind racing with the gravity of her next steps. She needed to gather more information, to fight for answers, even if it meant crossing paths with fear and danger. With unresolved questions fueling her determination, she knew this was where she had to draw the line. She would peel back the layers of secrecy surrounding Mr. Langston, even if it meant uncovering something that could shake the foundations of her world forever. As she walked through the now quiet halls, her resolve burned brighter, a flicker of hope amid darkness. The echoes of her boss's final words resonated deep inside her. Trust your instincts, be vigilant. Whatever it took, she would see this through to the end. Office was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had been brewing all week. Mia sat at her cluttered desk, the glow of her computer illuminating late-night reports and half-drunk coffee cups. She had just settled into a rhythm when Mr. Langston's sharp voice pierced the silence. Mia, his tone carried an urgency that sent a jolt through her. She looked up to find him standing in the doorway, his brow furrowed, clutching a suitcase that seemed oddly out of place in their corporate landscape. The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. What was happening? Sure, Mr. Langston. She rose from her chair, curiosity mingling with concern as he motioned her into his office. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. Mr. Langston paced like a lion in a cage, the suitcase sitting ominously in the corner. Mia, I need to talk to you about something serious, he said, staring at her intently. Okay, she replied, heart pounding. There was a weight to his words, a hint of desperation that gnawed at her curiosity. Before we dive in, let me ask you this, he started, pausing to collect his thoughts. The question surprised her, feeling wildly out of place given the palpable tension in the room. Not really, just the usual catching up on some reading, she said, shrugging it off. But as she spoke, she felt the moment slip away, an opportunity lost. Mr. Langston's eyes narrowed slightly, disappointment flickering across his face. Right, he waved a hand dismissively, but she could sense the change in him. He had opened a door only to slam it shut again. Of course, Mia replied, trying to match his intensity. It's complicated, he said, barely meeting her gaze, then he shook his head as if clearing his thoughts. She felt a pang of helplessness, sensing that whatever was swirling beneath the surface was far more pressing than any report. But there was something engaging in his eyes, a rawness she hadn't seen before, something that beckoned her to dig deeper. Mr. Langston, if something is troubling you, you can share it. We're a team, she ventured, searching for a way through the wall he had put up. He turned abruptly, crossing the room to the suitcase. You wouldn't understand, he snapped, frustration lining his voice. That stung. Her instincts told her there was so much more going on beneath the surface, things hidden beneath layers of corporate diplomacy and gray suits. Try me, she said, her voice firmer now. For a heartbeat he hesitated, and for a moment it seemed he was weighing his options, whether to confide or to retreat. But then the moment shattered like glass as he wiped the expression from his face, resolute. No, Mia, just focus on your work. Something inside her coiled tight as he turned away, and she felt her heart sink. Again, she had been pushed to the side. The repeated feeling of being unheard sat heavy on her. She glanced back at the suitcase, struggling to ignore its presence. The mystery it held made it impossible to put aside. Little did she know that encounter would soon tie her to a web of secrets that would change everything she thought she knew. As the hours passed, a chilling realization wrapped itself around Mia. Mr. Langston's attitude, the urgency, and the suitcase, it felt like a ticking clock, each second carrying an unspoken weight. She kept glancing at the clock, mentally calculating how much longer he would keep her there tonight. She thought, unease multiplying with every unanswered question. After what felt like an eternity, the clock struck 8. The office was devoid of life, leaving only the echo of her own heartbeat. Mr. Langston was still buried in paperwork, oblivious to the world outside. Gathering her courage, she decided she couldn't let it rest. Mr. Langston, she said quietly, and he looked up, irritation flaring. Drop it, Mia, he snapped, the heat of his response catching her off guard, but she couldn't drop it. You might want to take a break, she managed to say, sensing the storm brewing inside him. He turned away, his silence loud in the dim office. Hours later, as he remained consumed by papers, Mia's restless curiosity morphed into a brave determination. She knew she needed answers, not just for herself, but for him. There was something lurking beneath all of this, and she wasn't about to sit quietly and ignore it. Just then, the office door swung open. Mary, the office manager, stepped in tentatively. Mr. Langston, I just wanted to bring you those figures for tomorrow's meeting, she said, her voice light but tinged with uncertainty. He glanced up, flashing a half-hearted smile. Thanks, Mary, but I'm busy right now, he said, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Mia caught Mary's eyes, a shared concern passing between them. Mary opened her mouth to say something, but Mr. Langston's glare sent her retreating, leaving Mia feeling more isolated as he returned to his work. The silence grew thicker, and Mia felt like a ghost in her own body. She needed to do something drastic. Her mind raced through possibilities, wrestling with her fear of the unknown. Finally, she pushed back her chair, taking a deep breath as she approached him once more. Mr. Langston, please, she began, fighting against the tension in the air. If there's something you're dealing with, but he cut her off. He barked, the reprimand slicing through her. The tension escalated, vibrating between them. It was as if she had ignited a spark in a dry forest, one that could rapidly turn into a raging fire. The moment froze, heavy with unspoken words, but then instead of retreating, his expression softened, and he sighed as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Look, he said almost begrudgingly, this isn't the place for it. Just stay focused on your work. However, the spark of trust that had begun to form flickered out as he turned back to his papers. She realized this was more than a simple misunderstanding. This was a barrier he had carefully constructed over years of protecting himself. Mia felt a tightening knot in her stomach. She couldn't just sit back rearranging papers and pretending everything was fine. There must be more, a hint she could leverage to uncover what lay beneath. As he continued to work, she worked her own plan. You know I could help, she said, her tone casual. He didn't respond. The silence swallowed her words, leaving her feeling more alone than before. Frustrated but determined, she shifted her focus to the suitcase. Curiosity burned within her. What was in there? Was it more than just clothes? The suitcase loomed in the corner like a dark cloud, ominous yet magnetic. And so, without fully realizing it, Mia made a choice. She approached the suitcase, her heart pounding. Every step felt heavy with consequence, but the lure was overpowering. It was like gripping the handle of a door she needed to pry open, driven by an insatiable need to uncover the truth. Just as she reached down to touch it, the door swung open again. Mr. Langston was suddenly there, his eyes widening in shock. He demanded, his voice low but edged with electricity. Mia froze mid-motion. She stepped back, heart racing. Her voice trembled. Was she really going to confront him now? Curiosity isn't a virtue right now, he snapped, the energy in the room shifting. Then explain, Mia shot back, her courage spiking. You're shutting me out, he roared, the ferocity rattling her. He took a deep breath, visibly anchoring himself. Just stay away from it. That cut deep. Look at the heart of her desire to be a part of something valuable. I want to be here for you. For a moment, his expression flickered with something vulnerable, a hint of sadness buried beneath layers of leadership, but just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the cool mask of a leader. Mia, this isn't a game. In that moment, she felt like they were standing at the precipice of a chasm that threatened to consume them both. The doubts, the risks, the potential fallout all loomed large in the air. But as he retreated, Suitcase still gripped tightly in his hands, she realized something profound. This was not just about him, it was about her too. Her need for answers, her desire to not be just another cog in a machine, felt like an awakening. Mia, he started again, shifting gears, but this time she held her ground. No, do you ever think you could trust me? He hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But then he swiftly turned away, leaving her with more questions than answers. The door closed behind him with a weighty finality, resonating through the empty office. Mia stood there, engulfed in the silence. The air felt electric with the gravity of their exchange. She took a breath, steeling herself. She wouldn't walk away. She couldn't. With resolve burning bright, Mia decided to dig deeper. There had to be something more to this than just a simple suitcase. With determination, she grabbed a notepad and began jotting down everything she recalled from that night, clinging to the details like fragile threads of a mystery waiting to be unraveled. The following days turned into a blur as she plunged headfirst into research. She reviewed financial reports, sifting through statements for anything that felt amiss. The deeper she delved, the more tangled the web seemed to become. A pattern emerged, something was off. The numbers didn't add up, and she felt her instincts screaming louder than ever. It wasn't just corporate pressure here, it felt more sinister, shadowy beneath the polished surface. As days turned into nights, she could feel the urgency escalating. One evening, while digging through documents in the middle of a nearly empty office, she stumbled upon a file with Mr. Langston's name on it. Her heart raced. This was it, the piece she had been looking for. Inside the file was correspondence that hinted at shady business dealings, companies involved in scandals, and most shocking of all, a connection to organized crime. This was everything. The pieces clicked into place, illuminating the lurking danger tied to that suitcase. He wasn't just leaving, he was escaping. She had to confront him again. The next day, when he returned to the office after a brief absence, Mia was determined not to let the moment slip away. She waited until he was alone, then charged into his office, file in hand. Mr. Langston, he looked up, clearly annoyed. Her voice rose, raw with emotion. I found these, you have to explain. His expression twisted with a mix of surprise and anger. I didn't just look, I dug deeper. This is dangerous. I can handle it, he spat, but the warmth of his previous confidence was long gone. No, you can't. This isn't just about you anymore, she insisted, conviction surging through her. You're putting all of us at risk. Slowly, a crack of understanding passed between them. The fire of confrontation shifted into something deeper, a growing camaraderie forged through fear and urgency. For the first time, Mia saw the vulnerability behind his hardened facade. Okay, he finally said, his voice softer, but this conversation stays between us. As they stood there, she felt the gravity of that promise a pact formed through the shadow of uncertainty. Together, they began to unravel the layers of deception, piece by piece. And in that shared struggle, the walls he had built slowly crumbled. With her instincts guiding them, they navigated the treacherous waters of hidden agendas and looming threats. The conflict steeped like a dark brew, only escalating as they pressed against the ticking clock. With each challenge they faced together, their bond grew stronger, fending off the impending storm. And although Mia had entered the office searching for answers, she discovered something more valuable, the courage to confront the truth for both herself and Mr. Langston. Little did she know that the revelations they uncovered would reshape the very foundation of their lives, leading them on a journey they could never have predicted, one that would test their resolve and redefine the meaning of trust. Still, even within the uncertainty, a flicker of hope burned bright. Together, they were no longer fighting alone, but entered a partnership forged in the crucible of shared danger. As they plunged forward, the only certainty was that the path ahead was fraught with risk, and they would face it together, a team bound by discovery and the silent promise of trust. The chase for the truth had begun, and together they would find their way through the shadows. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, the only sound echoing in the dimly lit office. Mia sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, the paperwork seeming to blur together like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. She was tired, the kind of tired that settled in her bones after weeks of relentless work. It was late, and the office felt like a ghost town, a far cry from the daily hustle and bustle. Suddenly, the door swung open with a loud creak, jolting her from her stupor. Mr. Langston, her boss, stepped inside, his expression tense, a storm brewing behind his deep-set eyes. Mia could feel the energy in the room shift as he entered, the weight of his presence filling the space like an impending thunderstorm. Sure, Mr. Langston. He glanced around the almost empty office as if searching for eavesdroppers. There was a gleam in his eyes, a flicker of urgency that sparked Mia's interest, pricking her curiosity and unease. "Come into my office," he said, gesturing for her to follow him. She stood, curiosity blooming as she took a few steps toward him. As soon as they stepped into his office, she noticed the large, dark suitcase tucked in the corner. It looked almost misplaced, a stark contrast to the meticulously organized space filled with awards and accolades. Mia asked, regarding the suitcase with a frown. "No, but we need to have a serious talk," he said. He paced back and forth, the suitcase almost forgotten as a burden settled heavily on his shoulders. She asked, feeling the weight of the moment. It was rare for Mr. Langston to be this transparent, and it filled her with anxiety. "Before we discuss that, let me ask you a question," he said, finally pausing to look directly into her eyes. The question struck her as odd, given the current atmosphere. Not really. His voice softened, but the urgency was still there, like a distant storm cloud. But as quickly as it came, the softness vanished. "I need you focused on work." "Of course," she replied, feeling somewhat relieved that it was merely a weekend suggestion amid the seriousness. But she could see the tension flicker back in his eyes. Had he really asked her that just to dismiss her? With that, he turned back to the paperwork on his desk, seemingly shutting down the conversation as if it had never happened. Confusion buzzed in Mia's mind. She wanted to press him further. Was something actually wrong? Why did he ask about the weekend? But instead of insisting, she swallowed her questions and returned to her desk. The hours dragged on, shadows stretching across the office as evening descended. The atmosphere felt thick, almost suffocating. Still, Mr. Langston worked on, focused yet distracted, like he was trapped in a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. Mia glanced over at him, catching glimpses of his furrowed brow and clenched jaw. He was a man usually filled with confidence, a commanding presence, but now he seemed lost somehow, battling against unseen forces. With hesitation, she stood again. "Mister," he looked up, visibly annoyed by her persistent concern. "Mia, focus on your work." The sting of his words cut through her like a sharp blade, but Mia felt an inkling of urgency. Something was weighing down on him, something she needed to understand. As the clock ticked closer to 8, the silence between them grew heavier. Mia thought about the suitcase again. What was he packing for? The fleeting thought of opening it flickered, a surge of curiosity twirling in her mind. Finally, unable to take it any longer, she stood and approached the suitcase. Just as she reached for the handle, Mr. Langston's voice stopped her in her tracks. The word hung in the air, heavy with warning. "Just leave it alone," he said, turning back to his desk, but the urgency in his tone sent alarm bells ringing in her mind. She stepped back, confusion wrestling with her instincts. This wasn't just a simple suitcase, it held secrets, a mystery begging to be unraveled. As if the office had ears, silence enveloped them, buzzing with tension. Finally, she turned back to him. He paused, looking torn. "I have a lot on my plate right now, Mia." The finality in his tone made her stomach twist. Why would he treat her like this? With frustration boiling within her, she returned to her desk, feeling more like an outsider than ever. But as she worked, thoughts swirled like autumn leaves caught in a tempest. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened next would change things forever, and she needed to know what lay inside the suitcase. Later that night, after Mr. Langston finally left the office, an unsettling quiet descended around her. The shadows of uncertainty morphed into something far more sinister. As the clock ticked onwards, Mia peered once more at the suitcase, limbs tingling with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. She needed to find a way to be safe, to get to the bottom of this. That's when she made a choice. In the hazy light of her office, she planned her approach like a skilled detective on a case. She whispered to herself, heart pounding. She strode toward the suitcase. She hesitated, fingers hovering above the lock. The decision loomed over her like a tidal wave. She could break trust with her boss, betray the very thing she had worked to build. But this wasn't just about his secrets, it was about her right to know. Taking a deep breath, she clicked the lock open. The lid creaked as she lifted it, heart racing in tandem with her thoughts. Inside, she found neatly folded clothes, a few personal items. In several files, her pulse quickened as she sifted through them. Contracts, papers with unsettling evidence, not simply about business but about shady dealings, figures outside the law. This was more than she had imagined. She flipped through financial statements, catching whispers of illicit transactions that twisted her stomach into knots. But amid those documents lay a photograph that made her blood run cold. It was a snapshot of a nameless figure looming over a battered building, dark alleys and shadows blurring against a backdrop of chaos. Her heart sank. It was clear she had stumbled upon something far worse than her imagination could conjure. Mr. Langston wasn't just dealing with corporate pressure, he was entwined in something dangerous. Suddenly the door creaked open and she slammed the suitcase shut, panic racing through her veins. Mr. Langston stepped inside, his brow furrowed with concern. Mia, her heart pounded loud enough for him to hear. She called out, trying to feign calm while feeling as if every inch of her was exposed. His voice dropped, certainty lining the edges as he stepped closer. "No, I want to discuss our project. It's important," she said, forcing a smile, but every word dripped with tension. The storm brewing in his eyes mirrored her own fear. "Don't play games with me," she exclaimed, panic rising. "But Mister, he looked torn, conflicted. Mia could almost see the internal battle waging inside him. You don't want to know, Mia, she pressed, feeling a connection and urge to bridge the gap of truth between them. He hesitated, weighing each word. That realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just about her job, it was about everything else. The fear, the danger, it threatened to shatter her world. I can't walk away from this, she said, conviction lacing her voice. I need to know. Knowing could cost you more than you're prepared to lose, he replied, his voice low and intense. As they stood in that moment, surrounded by secrets and shadows, something shifted. Mia felt the bond of their shared struggle ignite, a flicker of hope amid the dark uncertainty that loomed. All I want is honesty, Mr. Langston. If there's something wrong, we face it together, she said, digging deep within herself for a strength she never knew she had. Deep into her eyes, the tension sparking like electricity between them. After a pause that stretched into eternity, he sighed, defeat washing over him. All right, I can handle it, she whispered, determination climbing. Together they sat down and Mr. Langston pulled out papers from the suitcase, laying them before her, revealing the heart of chaos that had engulfed them both. It's all connected, he warned. As the pieces began to fall into place, Mia felt the gravity of what they faced. This wasn't just about business anymore, it was about survival. Together, bound by their shared commitment to uncover the truth, they would navigate uncharted waters, facing the dangerous tides ahead. What had started as a simple question about their weekend turned into a confrontation of darkness and resilience. And in that moment, Mia realized the fight ahead wouldn't just shape their world, it would forge an unbreakable bond between them, a partnership formed amid uncertainty and trust. With the horizon looming before them, they took their first step into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead, determined to unravel the threads of deception together. As they delved deeper, they discovered not just the shadows in Mr. Langston's life, but the inner strength within themselves. And just like that, their adventure began, a race against time forged in the fire of truths, secrets, and the resilience of the human spirit. The office was silent, the kind of quiet that felt like a precursor to a storm. Mia sat at her desk, the soft hum of her computer barely cutting through the thick tension in the air. It was late in the evening, most of her coworkers had gone home, and she could feel the exhaustion weighing on her like a heavy blanket. But that's when she heard it, a sharp knock on the door followed by Mr. Langston's voice. Mia, his tone was urgent, and she felt a chill crawl up her spine. She called back, glancing at the clock. It was well past closing time. What could he possibly need this late? She stood up, brushing her hair back nervously, and walked into his office. The moment she stepped inside, she felt the energy shift. Mr. Langston was pacing, his back to her, fingers running through his hair as if he couldn't find a way to calm the storm raging in his mind. Close the door, he said without turning around. Mia did as he asked. The sound of the latch clicking into place made her heart race a little faster. She asked, trying to gauge his mood. He turned to face her, and in that moment she caught a glimpse of something darker behind his usually calm demeanor, an anxiety that was palpable. I need to talk to you about something important, he said, his voice low and serious, but instead of diving into whatever uncertainty loomed, he paused, as if waiting for her to say something. She replied, feeling the weight of his gaze. He asked, his eyes searching her face for an answer. That question hung in the air, oddly out of place. Not really. Just planning to catch up on some reading, she answered, her brow furrowed in confusion. Good, he muttered, looking slightly relieved, but it quickly turned serious again. Let's focus on the work. Mia felt the conversation slip away just like that, the intensity making her uneasy. Of course, she said, trying to maintain the momentum, but the nagging feeling that there was something more swirled in her gut. As he returned to the stack of papers on his desk, his hands trembled slightly, brushing against the surface as he rifled through them. Mia's attention flickered to the large, dark suitcase tucked away in the corner of the office. She hadn't noticed it before. What was it doing here? Her curiosity morphed into concern, and she forced herself to speak up again. Mr. Langston, is everything okay? That suitcase, it seems out of place. He shot her a quick glance, annoyance flashing across his face. Just a business trip, her instincts bristled. Why wouldn't he share more? But if you need to discuss anything, it's fine, Mia. Just focus on the report, he interrupted sharply, the urgency in his voice slicing through the air like a knife. His dismissive tone stung and a knot twisted in her stomach. She returned to her own desk, frustration bubbling beneath the surface, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The suitcase loomed in the corner of her mind, a dark shadow that beckoned to her. Hours sped by, the office now cloaked in shadows, the only light coming from the desk lamps flickering to life. She glanced at Mr. Langston, who was still buried in papers, but now he seemed even more lost. The tension had coiled tighter, wrapping around them both as everyone else had left for the night. Finally, unable to ignore her racing thoughts, Mia stood up again. Mister, she said, her voice a little firmer. He looked up, irritation creeping back into his expression. Mia just finished the report, he said, and there was an intensity in his eyes that told her not to push further. The air felt thick, charged with an unsaid truth, and she bit back the words that threatened to spill out. Instead, she returned to her desk, frustration bubbling within her, mingling with an insatiable curiosity. Each tick of the clock reverberated through her mind, and eventually the silence grew unbearable. She tried to focus on her work but kept stealing glances at the suitcase, imagining all the secrets it might hold. What would it reveal if only she dared to look? Just as the temptation became too strong, Mary, the office manager, walked in with a stack of folders. "Mr. Langston, I just wanted to bring these by for you," she said, but there was a hesitant note in her voice. "Thanks, Mary, but I'm busy right now," he replied curtly, dismissing her without a second thought. Mia watched as Mary left, surprise flickering in her eyes. The tension had become palpable, like a taut string ready to snap if plucked the wrong way. Once again, the office was silent, filled only with the sound of Mr. Langston's pen scratching across paper. Feeling restless, Mia decided to take a quick break. "I'll be right back," she said, stepping outside the office for a breath of fresh air. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, if only for a moment, but her thoughts wouldn't let her find peace. What was happening? Why was Mr. Langston acting so differently? When she returned, the tension felt thicker. Mr. Langston was still deep in concentration, but now there was sweat gleaming on his forehead as if he were fighting an internal battle. He said finally, looking up with raw intensity. "Sure," she replied, but her heart raced at the almost desperate look in his eyes. "Just trust me, focus on the project, and don't ask questions." That statement sent a chill down her spine. She whispered, but he was already back to his papers, shutting her out once more. Frustration boiled within her. Did he really think she would just ignore what was happening? She had to know. A bold resolve clashed with her sense of loyalty. She needed to investigate. Hours passed, the clock inching closer to midnight as curiosity gnawed at her. Finally, she made a decision. She would confront the mystery of the suitcase. She had to. The weight of the unanswered questions felt too heavy to bear. As the office grew darker, Mia waited until Mr. Langston stepped out for a moment. She felt her heart race as she approached the suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for it. It was now or never. Lifting the lid, she was met with neatly folded suits and a few personal items, a few changes of clothes, toiletries, but it was the documents that caught her attention. A thick stack of papers lay hidden beneath the clothes. With bated breath, she flipped through them, discovering contracts and lists of names. Each page painted a picture of something much larger than she had initially anticipated. There were shady transactions, names linked to unsavory deals that sent chills down her back. And that's when she found it, a photo tucked between two papers. Her heart raced as she examined it closely. It was a grainy image of a dark alley, men in shadowy silhouettes standing together, their faces obscured but the tension in their posture unmistakable. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching, and panic surged through her. Just as she slammed the suitcase shut, Mr. Langston returned, his eyes narrowing as they locked onto hers. He demanded, voice sharp. Mia's mind raced, trying to find the right words. "I was just checking for your travel plans," she stuttered, hoping to hide the truth. He snapped, the anger in his voice resonating deep within her. His eyes were ablaze, and she felt a pang of fear followed by determination. "I'm not lying," she said, refusing to back down. "I want to know what's going on." The storm shifted in his expression. "You don't know what you're stepping into," he said, his tone different now, almost pleading. "I need to know," she insisted, her heart pounding as adrenaline coursed through her veins. For a moment she thought he might explode, but instead he took a step back, his shoulders sagging with a heavy weight. "You don't understand how dangerous this is. It's not just about the board meeting, there are people involved." Fear washed over her, but beneath it lay an undeniable resolve. "Then we handle it together." Silence hung between them, the shadows creeping, gnawing at the fragile connection building in that dimly lit office. Finally, he exhaled heavily, the tension in his face softening slightly. "Okay, but you have to promise not to tell anyone else about this." "I promise," she said, feeling a sense of gravity settle within her. With the air thick with urgency, he gestured for her to sit down, then laid the papers back out on the desk. The dark suitcase was now an open book, revealing secrets that would alter their perception of the life they'd built. "This is bigger than you or me," he said, his voice calmer now. As they dove deeper into the mess, unraveling threads of threats and realities too complex to capture in mere words, Mia felt a shift. What had started as a simple question about the weekend had unveiled a storm brewing not just within her boss's life, but her own. They weren't just unraveling a corporate conspiracy, they were building a connection defined by resilience in the face of chaos. Every document pulled out from the suitcase unveiled layers of betrayal, yet with each discovery, they solidified their bond, a bond forged in secrecy, but illuminated by a shared purpose. As the night wore on, the two became a team, their fates intertwined in a world where loyalty was a commodity and trust was a risk. Together they faced the unknown, ready to embrace whatever came next. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but they were no longer alone. In that office, amid shadows and whispers, they found not just the truth hidden in documents and shadows, but a partnership that could stand firm against the tempest threatening to engulf them both. The storm was brewing, and together they would weather it. As the clock ticked ominously, the adventure began, not just a race against time but a test of strength, trust, and the power of camaraderie. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ping as Mia stepped out onto the dimly lit floor. The air felt electric, charged with tension that hung like a weight in her chest. She glanced at her watch. It was nearly 8 o'clock. The office was quiet, as it often was late in the day, but there was something different about this silence. It felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Mr. Langston's voice rang out from his office, cutting through the stillness. She hesitated for a moment before making her way over. His tone was sharp and urgent, a combination that always sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She asked, steadying herself as she stepped inside. He was standing near his desk, hands clasped tightly as if trying to hold himself together. The usual calm and composed demeanor was replaced by something raw and restless. A large suitcase sat in the corner of the room, its presence strangely ominous. "I need to discuss something with you," he began, his voice almost a whisper. The question hung in the air. Was this just small talk? It felt completely out of place in the tense atmosphere. Still, she answered, "Not really." "Good," he nodded, relief washing over his features for just a moment, but then it vanished, replaced by that familiar tension. "Let's talk about the project." Mia couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. She sensed that his question was more than just casual conversation. It was a barrier. He met her gaze for a fleeting moment, a flicker of vulnerability passing through his eyes, but it was quickly overridden by the hard mask he wore. The dismissal was sharp and final, leaving Mia feeling as if she had just been shut out of a room she desperately wanted to enter. "Fine," she said, backing off but still feeling that tug of unresolved questions. But her mind wouldn't let it go. The weight of that suitcase stayed with her, and as Mr. Langston returned to his papers, she felt the stirrings of something deeper. Why was it there? What did it contain? As minutes turned into hours, the clock ticked slowly, each tick resonating in the empty office. She could see him through the glass wall, hunched over, the shadows of his stress stretching across his handsome features. The silence felt heavy, punctuated only by the rustle of paper and the soft tapping of keys. Mia stole glances at Mr. Langston, who seemed more absorbed than ever, yet there was something in his body language that didn't sit right. There was an urgency, a tension threading through every movement. It felt as if he was preparing for something monumental. Just as she was about to immerse herself back into work, she heard a faint knock on the doorframe. Mary, the office manager, peeked in. "Mr. Langston, do you have a moment? I thought you might need these for tomorrow's meeting," she said cheerfully. "Yes, thank you, but I'm a bit busy," he replied curtly, hardly looking up. Mary's expression faded, replaced by a look of concern. She offered a hesitant nod before retreating, leaving Mia alone with Mr. Langston again. The tension in the air pulsed like an unplayed chord, leaving them both feeling unsteady. Mia inhaled sharply, gathering her courage. "Mr. Langston, please." He finally looked up, irritation flashing behind his eyes. "I said I'm fine," he snapped, but the edge to his voice belied his words. The frustration boiled inside her. "You don't sound fine." "Just do your job, Mia," he barked, the command sharp enough to cut through the air. She felt the sting of it, a mix of anger and disappointment. "I can't just ignore what's happening." She stepped forward, feeling the courage swell inside her. He hesitated, eyeing her with a mix of annoyance and something softer, almost pleading. But then he turned away, back to his papers, dismissing her yet again. The knot in her stomach tightened. It was like a door had swung shut, yet all she wanted was to pull it open. Instead, she sank back into her chair. What was it about this office that suffocated every question she had? The suitcase loomed in her mind, an unfilled puzzle piece that she desperately needed to connect. As the hours crept by, Mia wrapped her head around the documents spread across her desk, but her focus kept shifting back to Mr. Langston, hunched over in silence. Every so often he would shoot her a glance, and she felt those moments crackle with an intensity she couldn't ignore. The clock ticked relentlessly, the shadows growing longer when finally Mr. Langston stood. He grabbed the suitcase, hefting it with urgency. "I need to go," he declared, the weight of those words trembling in the air. "Wait," Mia said, standing up. "You can't just rush out like this. We need to finish this report, and Mia, I don't have time for this," he snapped, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. For a moment she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of fear, vulnerability that had been hidden beneath layers of professionalism, but just as quickly he masked it all over again. She pressed, feeling frustrated and scared at the same time. "Just forget about it," he said, turning toward the door, but Mia felt her heart race, instinct kicking in. "I refuse to ignore what's happening," she said, stepping in front of him. "If something is wrong, I want to help." He hesitated, looking past her into the dim office, almost as if he were scanning for an escape. "You don't want to get involved in this," he warned, a quiet intensity creeping into his voice. She shouted, desperation pouring out. Her words hung in the air, a palpable force, and for the first time he seemed thrown off guard, the mask faltering as he looked searchingly at her. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered finally, his gaze faltering. "Try me," she pushed, her heart racing. She needed answers. She couldn't back down now. He backed up slightly, hands gripping the suitcase tightly. "You don't know what you're asking for," he warned, but Mia felt an unfamiliar surge of determination. "Then just show me." Finally, after a moment of heavy silence, he set the suitcase down and exhaled. It felt like the universe had paused and her heart raced in anticipation. "Just show me," she insisted. He unzipped the suitcase, the sound slicing through the thick air between them. Inside lay a neat pile of clothes, but beneath that were stacks of papers. "This is what I was working on," he explained, pulling out a series of documents. The tension grew as she peered into the suitcase. She asked, puzzled as she caught sight of names, figures, and what looked like maps. "If I show you this, you can't share it with anyone." "This is classified," he said, eyes darting towards the door as if expecting someone to walk in any second. She nodded slowly, the gravity of the moment pressing on her chest. The first document he handed over was a list of names, some crossed out, some highlighted. "These are potential targets," he said sharply, and Mia's blood ran cold. "Targets," she managed to choke out, fear curling in her stomach like a snake. "Look, it's complicated. It pertains to what I'm working on." "But I want to know," she insisted, her voice shaking. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. "I'm involved in investigations that stem from organized crime." She pressed, adrenaline spilling into her voice. "Documents have gone missing. Dangerous people are involved, and if they find out I'm looking into them, they'll come after me." Mia's heart raced, panic igniting within her as the weight of his words crushed down. He paused, looking her directly in the eyes. Mia asked, trying to collect her scattered thoughts. "Just act normal, don't change anything. I need to keep you safe," he replied gravely. "Safe from what?" "You're on the inside of something dangerous," she countered, feeling the layers of protection he was trying to put between them. Before he could respond, the door swung open and Mary returned. "Mr. Langston, I thought you might need," she froze, staring at the suitcase, her eyes darting back and forth between them like a pendulum. "Mia, this isn't what it looks like," he said quickly, but fear crept into his voice. Mary asked, concern etched on her face as she stepped inside the office, her earlier cheer slipping away. Mia felt a rush of panic rise and she quickly looked back to Mr. Langston. I was just helping Mr. Langston sort through some tasks," she said, her heart racing, but she could feel the walls close in around her, danger lurking just beyond them. Mary repeated, eyeing the suitcase warily. "Yes," he shot back, his tone authoritative but betraying a thread of anxiety. "It's all fine, Mary. Just some materials for the upcoming project." Mary's intuition kicked in. "You sure?" "It's not," he insisted, a tightness creeping into his voice. With an unreadable expression, Mary glanced between them before finally backing away. "All right." The moment the door closed, the weight of silence returned. They both turned back toward each other, tension electric in the air. "You realize this is becoming too complicated," Mr. Langston said, his voice strained. "People are starting to listen." Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Then let's figure it out together," she urged, feeling the fierce need to break free from the darkness becoming entwined with her life. "Together," he echoed, his eyes softening slightly. As they turned back to the documents, a new resolve blossomed. They weren't just two employees caught in the thunderstorm of corporate politics. They were now partners facing an invisible threat together. In that tiny office, surrounded by secrets and shadows, their bond was forged in the fire of shared chaos. It wouldn't be easy, they would face hurdles and trials, but with each step they took into the unknown, they'd become stronger, more resilient. Mia felt it in her core. She would not be a passive observer in her life any longer. She had stepped into the crosshairs of something bigger than herself, and she was ready to meet that challenge head-on, side by side with Mr. Langston. In the depths of that quiet office, they transformed chaos into the fuel of determination. The suitcase, a mere object containing hidden truths, became a catalyst for change, igniting a fire that would propel them forward. And as the night wore on, a bond began to form, igniting a fire of courage and solidarity that could face the many uncertainties ahead. Together, they took a step further into the unknown, the shadows around them no longer a place of fear, but a realm of opportunities waiting to be discovered. The elevator door slid open with a soft ping as Mia stepped out onto the dimly lit floor. The air felt electric, charged with tension that hung like a weight in her chest. She glanced at her watch. It was nearly 8 o'clock. The office was quiet, as it often was late in the day, but there was something different about this silence. It felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Mr. Langston's voice rang out from his office, cutting through the stillness. She hesitated for a moment before making her way over. His tone was sharp and urgent, a combination that always sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She asked, steadying herself as she stepped inside. He was standing near his desk, hands clasped tightly as if trying to hold himself together. The usual calm and composed demeanor was replaced by something raw and restless. A large suitcase sat in the corner of the room, its presence strangely ominous. "I need to discuss something with you," he began, his voice almost a whisper. The question hung in the air. Was this just small talk? It felt completely out of place in the tense atmosphere. Still, she answered, "Not really." "Good," he nodded, relief washing over his features for just a moment. But then it vanished, replaced by that familiar tension. "Let's talk about the project." Mia couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. She sensed that his question was more than just casual conversation. It was a barrier. Mister, he met her gaze for a fleeting moment, a flicker of vulnerability passing through his eyes, but it was quickly overridden by the hard mask he wore. The dismissal was sharp and final, leaving Mia feeling as if she had just been shut out of a room she desperately wanted to enter. "Fine," she said, backing off but still feeling that tug of unresolved questions. But her mind wouldn't let it go. The weight of that suitcase stayed with her, and as Mr. Langston returned to his papers, she felt the stirrings of something deeper. Why was it there? What did it contain? As minutes turned into hours, the clock ticked slowly, each tick resonating in the empty office. She could see him through the glass wall, hunched over, the shadows of his stress stretching across his handsome features. The silence felt heavy, punctuated only by the rustle of paper and the soft tapping of keys. Mia stole glances at Mr. Langston, who seemed more absorbed than ever, yet there was something in his body language that didn't sit right. There was an urgency, a tension threading through every movement. It felt as if he was preparing for something monumental. Just as she was about to immerse herself back into work, she heard a faint knock on the doorframe. Mary, the office manager, peeked in. "Mr. Langston, do you have a moment? I thought you might need these for tomorrow's meeting," she said cheerfully. "Yes, thank you, but I'm a bit busy," he replied curtly, hardly looking up. Mary's expression faded, replaced by a look of concern. She offered a hesitant nod before retreating, leaving Mia alone with Mr. Langston again. The tension in the air pulsed like an unplayed chord, leaving them both feeling unsteady. Mia inhaled sharply, gathering her courage. "Mr. Langston, please." He finally looked up, irritation flashing behind his eyes. "I said I'm fine," he snapped, but the edge to his voice belied his words. The frustration boiled within her. "Just do your job, Mia," he barked, the command sharp enough to cut through the air. She felt the sting of it, a mix of anger and disappointment. "I can't just ignore what's happening." She stepped forward, feeling the courage swell inside her. He hesitated, eyeing her with a mix of annoyance and something softer, almost pleading. But then he turned away, back to his papers, dismissing her yet again. The knot in her stomach tightened. It was like a door had swung shut, yet all she wanted was to pull it open. Instead, she sank back into her chair. What was it about this office that suffocated every question she had? The suitcase loomed in her mind, an unfilled puzzle piece that she desperately needed to connect. As the hours crept by, Mia wrapped her head around the documents spread across her desk, but her focus kept shifting back to Mr. Langston, hunched over in silence. Every so often, he would shoot her a glance, and she felt those moments crackle with an intensity she couldn't ignore. The clock ticked relentlessly, the shadows growing longer when finally Mr. Langston stood. He grabbed the suitcase, hefting it with urgency. "I need to go," he declared, the weight of those words trembling in the air. "Wait," Mia said, standing up. "You can't just rush out like this. We need to finish this report, and Mia, I don't have time for this," he snapped, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. For a moment she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of fear, vulnerability that had been hidden beneath layers of professionalism, but just as quickly he masked it all over again. She pressed, feeling frustrated and scared at the same time. "Just forget about it," he said, turning toward the door, but Mia felt her heart race, instinct kicking in. "I refuse to ignore what's happening," she said, stepping in front of him. "If something is wrong, I want to help." He hesitated, looking past her into the dim office, almost as if he were scanning for an escape. "You don't want to get involved in this," he warned, a quiet intensity creeping into his voice. She shouted, desperation pouring out. Her words hung in the air, a palpable force, and for the first time he seemed thrown off guard, the mask faltering as he looked searchingly at her. "You wouldn't understand," he muttered, finally, his gaze faltering. "Try me," she pushed, her heart racing. She needed answers, she couldn't back down now. He backed up slightly, hands gripping the suitcase tightly. "You don't know what you're asking for," he warned, but Mia felt an unfamiliar surge of determination. "Then just show me." Finally, after a moment of heavy silence, he set the suitcase down and exhaled. It felt like the universe had paused and her heart raced in anticipation. "Just show me," she insisted. He unzipped the suitcase, the sound slicing through the thick air between them. Inside lay a neat pile of clothes, but beneath that were stacks of papers. "This is what I was working on," he explained, pulling out a series of documents. The tension grew as she peered into the suitcase. She asked, puzzled as she caught sight of names, figures, and what looked like maps. "If I show you this, you can't share it with anyone." "This is classified," he said, eyes darting towards the door as if expecting someone to walk in any second. She nodded slowly, the gravity of the moment pressing on her chest. The first document he handed over was a list of names, some crossed out, some highlighted. "These are potential targets," he said sharply, and Mia's blood ran cold. "Targets," she managed to choke out, fear curling in her stomach like a snake. "Look, it's complicated. It pertains to what I'm working on." "But I want to know," she insisted, her voice shaking. He ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. "I'm involved in investigations that stem from organized crime." She pressed, adrenaline spilling into her voice. "Documents have gone missing. Dangerous people are involved, and if they find out I'm looking into them, they'll come after me." Mia's heart raced, panic igniting within her as the weight of his words crushed down. "Us," he paused, looking her directly in the eyes. Mia asked, trying to collect her scattered thoughts. Just act normal, don't change anything. I need to keep you safe, he replied gravely. Safe from what? You're on the inside of something dangerous, she countered, feeling the layers of protection he was trying to put between them. Before he could respond, the door swung open and Mary returned. Mr. Langston, I thought you might need, she froze, staring at the suitcase, her eyes darting back and forth between them like a pendulum. Mia, this isn't what it looks like, he said quickly, but fear crept into his voice. Mary asked, concern etched on her face as she stepped inside the office, her earlier cheer slipping away. Mia felt a rush of panic rise, and she quickly looked back to Mr. Langston. I was just helping Mr. Langston sort through some tasks, she said, her heart racing, but she could feel the walls close in around her, danger lurking just beyond them. Mary repeated, eyeing the suitcase warily. Yes, he shot back, his tone authoritative but betraying a thread of anxiety. It's all fine, Mary, just some materials for the upcoming project. Mary's intuition kicked in. You sure it's not? He insisted, a tightness creeping into his voice. With an unreadable expression, Mary glanced between them before finally backing away. All right, the moment the door closed, the weight of silence returned. They both turned back toward each other, tension electric in the air. You realize this is becoming too complicated, Mr. Langston said, his voice strained. People are starting to listen. Mia took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Then let's figure it out together, she urged, feeling the fierce need to break free from the darkness becoming entwined with her life. Together, he echoed, his eyes softening slightly. As they turned back to the documents, a new resolve blossomed. They weren't just two employees caught in the thunderstorm of corporate politics, they were now partners facing an invisible threat together. In that tiny office, surrounded by secrets and shadows, their bond was forged in the fire of shared chaos. It wouldn't be easy, they would face hurdles and trials, but with each discovery they'd become stronger. Mia felt it in her core. She would not be a passive observer in her life any longer. She had stepped into the crosshairs of something bigger than herself, and she was ready to meet that challenge head-on, side by side with Mr. Langston. In the depths of that quiet office, they transformed chaos into the fuel of determination. The suitcase, a mere object containing hidden truths, became a catalyst for change, igniting a fire that would propel them forward. And as the night wore on, a bond began to form, igniting a fire of courage and solidarity that could face the many uncertainties ahead. Together, they took a step further into the unknown, the shadows around them no longer a place of fear, but a realm of opportunities waiting to be discovered. They were on a mission, now one that would test their limits, but also reveal the strength that lay beyond, waiting patiently to be unlocked. The clock ticked ominously in the background, a constant reminder of time slipping away. Mia sat at her desk, fingers tapping nervously against her keyboard as she fought to stay focused. The office was quiet, an unusual stillness that felt thick and heavy in the air, almost like the calm before a storm. Her gaze flicked to the clock again. It was well past 5. She was the last person left, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and the soft glow of her computer screen. Mr. Langston's voice sliced through the silence, jolting her upright. She looked up to see him standing in his office doorway, his brows knitted together with an intensity she didn't often see. Sure, she replied, her heart racing as she stood, trouble brewing in her gut. She stepped into his office and the door clicked shut behind her. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension, and Mia felt as though she were being pulled into something deeper than she could understand. Have a seat, he said, motioning toward a chair. He was pacing now, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as if that would somehow anchor him. She asked, unable to shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. The question struck her as odd, feeling wildly out of place. Not much, just catching up on sleep, I guess. He let out a shaky breath as he resumed pacing. She could see the muscles in his jaw clenching and unclenching. Mia, I need you to focus on your work, he said, shifting the conversation abruptly. Confusion washed over her as the sudden shift felt like a wall had been erected between them. Wait, she said, trying to bridge the gap. Is something going on? You seem... I'm fine, he replied too quickly, a hint of frustration in his voice. He turned away, fixing his gaze on the stacks of papers on his desk. Her heart sank in her chest. She felt the door to a crucial conversation slam shut, leaving her outside. There was something about his demeanor that told her he was hiding something, that there were layers of complexity just beneath the surface. She shifted in her seat, glancing toward the corner where a large suitcase stood, unassuming yet foreboding, as if it carried untold secrets. She pressed again, standing her ground. Mia, I don't have time for this, he snapped, a flash of anger flickering in his eyes. That stung. I'm just trying to help, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He looked at her and for just a moment his facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability, but it vanished as quick as it came, replaced by his usual stoic mask. Silence lingered between them, heavy and unsatisfying. The unanswered questions gnawed at her. The suitcase in the corner seemed larger than life, as if it contained all the answers she sought. She felt like a moth drawn to a flame, unable to turn away. What could be inside? Hours slipped by and the office bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Each tick of the clock echoed louder in the stillness, amplifying her unease. Mia glanced at Mr. Langston, who was now furiously typing, his concentration unwavering but his demeanor all wrong. The tension in the room felt tangible, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Finally, the weight of the silence became unbearable. "Mister," she ventured, her heart racing. He looked up, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Mia, just focus on your work." She turned away, feeling a mix of frustration and helplessness. All she wanted to do was help, yet she found herself being pushed aside like an afterthought. When 8 o'clock rolled around, the office was nearly empty. Mr. Langston continued to work, but the suitcase remained in the corner, drawing her gaze back like a magnet. She took a deep breath, the urge to confront her instincts becoming overwhelming. What if she just took a peek? Just then, Mary, the office manager, walked by, her cheerfulness dimmed by the late hour. "Mr. Langston, are you still here?" Wondering if you needed anything, she asked, her voice light yet tinged with concern. "No, Mary, I'm fine," he replied, a bit more curtly than necessary. The irritation in his voice cut through the air, and Mary took a step back, looking as if she knew better than to push him. After she left, Mia felt her heart race again. She thought, tension coiling tight inside her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something crucial was slipping through her fingers. She found herself saying, breaking the silence once more. Mr. Langston stopped typing and looked at her, the weariness in his eyes palpable. "Mia, I can't explain everything right now. Seriously." Her voice was sharper now, frustration spilling over. "Mia, I'm about to explode from stress," he exclaimed, his voice rising. "I need you to trust me and focus on your tasks for now." She felt anger surge, but beneath it there was fear of what he was hiding, fear of being left in the dark. She replied, absolutely incredulous. "How can I trust you when you act like this? Helping would mean staying away," he shot back, the tension thickening in the air. Mia crossed her arms, standing her ground. He visibly flinched at the mention of it, as if the mere word had struck a nerve. "It's nothing," he said, almost defensively. "It's clearly not nothing." Her frustration morphed into desperation. Finally, he ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion etched across his face. "Mia, you don't understand what you're asking for." But as she looked at him, she saw that her question had cracked the wall built around him. She couldn't ignore the charge in the air, the crackling urgency that begged to be addressed. "Please," she pleaded, the vulnerability in her voice stronger than her anger. "Let me help you." For a long moment, he seemed to wrestle with himself, his expression shifting. "Fine," he said finally, sounding resigned. "But you have to promise me one thing, you won't tell anyone else about this." "I swear," she said, feeling the pulse of adrenaline racing through her. With a heavy sigh, he walked over to the suitcase and unzipped it. The sound seemed to echo ominously, the tension rising to a breaking point. He opened it carefully, and Mia felt her heart pound in her chest, fearing what awaited inside. He reached in and pulled out a stack of papers. "This," he started, holding them out for her to see, "is what I'm working on." Mia leaned closer, scanning the documents. A cold knot settled in her stomach as she recognized some names, some places. She asked, her mind racing. "Organized crime," he replied, his voice low. Mia felt the blood drain from her face. "Yes," he said seriously, his eyes locking onto hers. She breathed, her pulse racing. "They're dangerous people, Mia. I don't want this crashing into your life," he said, the weight of his words crashing down like a wave. Her voice cracked slightly, the fear palpable. "It's too late for that," he said, his expression darkening. "They have eyes everywhere." Her heart raced as the implications sank in. She was standing on the precipice of something terrifying, yet the adrenaline coursed through her veins, sparking her instincts alive. "I'll handle it, but you need to act normal. Keep doing your job. Do not let on that you know anything," he instructed, urgency in every word. "You can't just shut me out. I want to know," she insisted, daring to step closer. He closed his eyes momentarily, and when he opened them, the weariness had transformed into a steely determination. "Promise," she said, heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. This was no longer just about work, it was about survival. Just then there was a knock on the door, causing them both to jump back. "Mr. Mary," called from the other side. He shouted back, his voice strained. The momentary panic between them flared, and Mia's heart raced. "Mia, you need to go back to your desk," he urged softly, tension tightening around every syllable. "Wait," Mia blurted out before she could stop herself. Mr. Langston said firmly as he glanced toward the door. The door swung slightly ajar, and Mary peeked in, suspicion etching lines across her face. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's fine," Mr. Langston replied quickly, forcing a smile. Mia felt the weight of the moment, glancing between them. There was so much at stake, so many unanswered questions lingering in the air. Mary's gaze sharpened, her expression searching. "I'll keep that in mind," Mr. Langston said dismissively. Once she retreated, he turned back to Mia. "I know," she replied, her resolve hardening. "We'll need to meet in secret," he said, the urgency returning. She asked, feeling alive with adrenaline. "The cafe down the street, I'll text you a time," he said decisively. "Just remember this is serious." "I understand," she said, her voice steady with determination. With that, they exchanged a loaded glance, the understanding that they were now bound together in a way neither had expected. And as the shadows deepened in the office, Mia felt the stirrings of purpose ignite within her. They were stepping into darkness together, navigating a world that swirled with danger and uncertainty. But in the face of what lay ahead, she felt an immense sense of strength found not only in herself, but in the connection forged between them. With every secret unveiled, every shared glance, they were no longer just co-workers. They were allies destined to confront the chaos that threatened to consume them both. The storm was upon them, and together they would face whatever came next, ready to grapple with the consequences of the world they had inadvertently stepped into. As she left his office, the weight of the suitcase now felt light, transformed into a beacon of hope and resilience. Mia was no longer merely an observer in her life. She was a participant, propelled forward by the determination to unravel the threads of danger, rediscovering the strength that bubbled just beneath the surface, waiting to be unlocked. And together they would navigate the shadows, finding light in the unlikeliest of places. As the clock struck 6, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a surreal glow on the deserted office. Mia sat at her desk, the soft murmur of her computer the only sound cutting through the heavy silence. Her gaze wandered to the large window where the last remnants of sunlight bathed the city streets in golden hues. It was serene, yet something felt deeply unsettled. Just then, the door to her boss's office swung open and Mr. Langston stepped into view. There was urgency in his stride, a frantic energy that sent an immediate sense of unease coursing through her. He looked over his shoulder as if he expected someone to follow him, his expression tight and focused. He called, his voice slicing through the stillness. "Can you come here?" Her heart quickened. She replied, pushing away from her desk and hurrying toward him. The suitcase resting near the door caught her eye. She hadn't noticed it before, and something about it made her uneasy, a dark shadow looming in the otherwise bright room. She asked as she stepped into his office, closing the door behind her. Mr. Langston stood by his desk, pacing like a caged animal. "We need to talk about the presentation for tomorrow," he said, his voice tense. She responded, trying to match his intensity. Before he continued, he stopped abruptly, turning to face her with an almost searching look in his eyes. "Let me ask you this first." The question felt out of place, unwarranted even. It sent a ripple of confusion through her. No, just catching up on some work." His expression flickered for a moment, a shadow of relief passing over his features. But just as quickly, it morphed back into that tight-lipped urgency. "Good, just focus on your work this week," he said, the tone change making her feel a little dismissed. She asked, feeling some urgency creeping into her own voice. He started to speak, but then cut himself off, shaking his head. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he replied quickly, returning to the papers on his desk. The suitcase in the corner caught her eye again, now pulsing with a quiet allure. Could be so important that it merited being brought into the office at this hour. Mia's instincts buzzed. She had learned over the years to mistrust the obvious. "Mister," he paused, the moment stretched between them, thick with unsaid words. She could see the conflict warring in his eyes. "Mia, please just get back to your projects." It was just the way he said it, almost like a warning. She took a step back, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy blanket. "You're shutting me out." "Mia," he said, his voice dropping and softening slightly, "I appreciate your concern, but you need to focus." The tension between them morphed into an uncomfortable silence as Mia stood there, her heart pounding now. What was she even supposed to do with that? With unresolved questions buzzing around her head, she forced herself to turn and head back to her desk, frustration boiling beneath the surface. Hours passed, and the office turned darker as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline. Every tick of the clock seemed to echo in her head, amplifying the weight of uncertainty and tension that hung thick in the air. She stole glances back at Mr. Langston, who remained buried in work but seemed more rigid, more agitated with every passing minute. As the clock inched closer to 8, an intuition tugged at her. What if he was hiding something serious? The suitcase in the corner grew more imposing by the moment, its presence demanding attention. When Mr. Langston stood up finally, the suitcase was still by the door, looking uncharacteristically ominous. "Mia, I need to go," he declared, grabbing the suitcase with urgency. "Wait," she asked, her voice racing as panic began to rise within her. "Just handling some business," he said curtly, but the flicker of something behind his eyes suggested otherwise. "Is there more to this? You can't just rush out without explaining," Mia pressed, stepping closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mia, you don't need to know everything," he said in a tone that felt almost defensive. "No, but I want to." For a moment, uncertainty flashed across his face, but his expression hardened again. "It's not that simple." But Mia couldn't shake the feeling that he was trying to protect her from something far more dangerous than he was letting on. "You've barely been honest with me." His eyes narrowed slightly, frustration boiling over. The storm raged in her chest. She gestured toward the suitcase. "What's in there? Are you leaving town?" He shook his head, fatigue creeping into his posture. "But you're my boss." Suddenly, the vulnerability that usually hid beneath his tough exterior broke through. He started, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice, but before he could finish, the office door swung open. In walked Mary, the office manager. Her cheerful demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension that engulfed the room. "Mr. Langston, I thought you might want to go over the meeting agenda one last time," she said, glancing nervously between them. He snapped, the sharpness in his tone causing Mia's heart to skip a beat. "Go back to your desk." Mary blinked, clearly taken aback. A moment of silence stretched as she backed away, leaving them in an even thicker atmosphere of tension. Mr. Langston turned back to Mia, his frustration palpable. "But it's already too late," she retorted, the anger flaring within her now. He yelled, the exclamation hanging in the air, heavy with unsaid threats. She asked, voice steady, but there was a tremor of fear behind her words. His shoulders slumped, and for a heartbeat the bravado slipped. "You really don't want to know," he said softly, defeated. But that trust had already been worn thin. "What kind of trouble are you in, mister?" The words came out more desperate than she intended, and she could see he was torn between revealing the truth or retreating further behind his shield. He rubbed his temples, contemplating, looking torn. "You're not equipped for this world, Mia," she pressed, feeling the ground beneath her start to shift. "I'm dealing with things I can't afford to drag you into. You're a good worker, but this is about more than just business." The words spilled out before she could think twice. "There are people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets," he said grimly. "Then let's uncover those secrets together. You don't have to take this on alone." The certainty in her voice surprised even her. He paused, weighing her words. For a wild moment, Mia thought she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You might not grasp what you're asking for," he said finally. Just then he spun around, grabbing the suitcase again. "I have to go," he said, voice low but filled with an urgency that heated the air between them. She asked, feeling panic set in again. "I can't say it's," she yelled, desperation creeping in. He stopped in the doorway, looking back at her, and for a moment everything hung in the balance. She could see the emotional struggle unfold on his face, and that tight churning in her gut intensified as if whatever choice he made next could alter the course of their lives forever. But before he could answer, he hesitated for a heartbeat, and then he left, suitcase in hand, disappearing down the corridor. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed in her ears. Mia stood frozen, the impact of his departure settling heavily in the silence that followed. Her heart raced as confusion and anxiety washed over her. What had just happened? She was left with 1,000 unanswered questions, swirling like a storm inside her. With her mind racing, she felt the weight of the suitcase lingering in the corner of the office, taunting her with its secrets. Turning her gaze back toward the door, Mia knew she couldn't just let this go. She wouldn't let fear dictate her fate. As the shadows lengthened in the office, determination ignited within her. She wanted answers. Whatever Mr. Langston was involved in, she would discover the truth. And in that moment, she made a choice. Even if it meant wading into dangerous waters, she would uncover the secrets blocking her path. Gathering her things, she slipped out of her office, a quiet resolve hardening her steps. But little did she know as she stepped into the looming unknown that the true storm was just beginning. The world outside was filled with shadows, waiting to reveal themselves, and the journey ahead would challenge everything she thought she knew. Just as she turned the corner, she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She pulled it out and noticed a new message on the screen. "Meet me at the cafe down the street." Her heart raced at the realization Mr. Langston needed her. A flicker of hope ignited within her, but the weight of uncertainty loomed large, casting shadows over her determination. What awaited her at that cafe? Would she finally get answers, or plunge deeper into a world of intrigue and danger? With the weight of the unknown pressing at her back, she took a deep breath and stepped outside. The night air enveloped her, cool and charged with possibility. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it, because now, more than ever, she understood. Sometimes the path to clarity demands that you brave the shadows, even when the truth feels like an insurmountable storm.